So I wanted to welcome Amie Seisay. She is a good friend and a good community member, as most of you know, and she's going to be talking to us today about some really cool stuff in SharePoint Office 365, and I'm so looking forward to this. And I am very blessed that I get to work with her, and she continues to educate and push me. So Amie, I'm so thankful you're here today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. And I really appreciate everyone joining in today into this session. Like I said, when we first started, it was just really good to see all the names pop up and all the familiar faces. And feel free to, of course, share your perspectives in chat, because we all have different perspectives based on our experiences working with these different Office 365 instances. So I'm going to share my screen with everyone, and we'll get started. So of course, we're going to talk about a number of different scenarios as it relates to some of the features that either have recently rolled out to Office 365 in GCC, as specific as possible to GCC, and of course, some of the features that have been around that may affect different business users, especially in government agencies. And we're going to, of course, talk about some of the planning that can be put into place to help support the owners of the different apps, or even some of the users of the different apps. If you are the ones that are maintaining or deploying these different products, such as Teams, or if you are supporting SharePoint, then my goal is to provide some helpful perspectives. So again, my name is Amie Seisay, CEO and founder of Seisay IT Solutions, and we help companies work more efficiently using Office 365 apps. And so just to level set, we're talking about GCC, and we're going to talk about some of my experiences. Feel free to type in chat, feel free to ask questions, put comments in there, and just share your experiences. And I'm going to, of course, have screenshots, and I'm going to have some recorded demos that I'm going to play as videos, and the screenshots and the demos are going to be from my commercial tenant, not from a GCC tenant. So I wanted to respect the level of access that I have in different environments and just create this experience from my commercial environment. So the screenshots may differ a bit. And so let's start talking about Teams first and foremost. So when I am hosting an online training session, I usually start out the course with rules of engagement. And of course, I'm going to let people know to mute their microphones, to reduce background interference. But then I'm also going to give them perspectives on how they can collaborate so that they're not just quiet in the session the entire time. Because usually when people attend remotely, they're a bit more quiet than they are if they're in person. And so I'm going to show them, I'm going to share my screen usually and show them the option for starting to chat, right, and typing in information. So I might say to them, when you're done working on your exercise, type in the words done, or I might show them the emojis icon and show them how to give me a thumbs up when they're done. And the feature that just rolled out to GCC, I would say 2 or 3 weeks ago, is the raise your hands feature. And so the raise your hands feature lets me, of course, kind of see that they are prompting me for my attention, but it doesn't interrupt the flow of the conversation if they just start, talking as I'm speaking, and then I can kind of address them when it's appropriate. And then in this people pane that pops up, you can also lower their hand as well as they can. And so the other thing that I noticed is that there are different experiences for how people can join meetings. And I think sometimes people get tripped up on how they join and also how they share their screens. And so a lot of government agencies are still using Internet Explorer as their default browser. And I'm curious if you can put in chat, Are there any government agencies, have they switched over to Edge, or is everyone still primarily using Internet Explorer as the default browser? So please put that in chat. I'm curious to see what people say. So when people join the meeting and they just, in Outlook, they click on join Teams meeting, they get taken to the browser, and then they have an option whether they join in the browser or they actually open up Teams. And sometimes people will just stay in the browser and then they try to share their screens. And of course, when you open up Internet Explorer and you're trying to share your screen, it's going to say that desktop sharing is not available. So then I have to show them how to join Teams via the application, maybe sometimes even where to find it on their desktops. And so sometimes I try to explain, just either staying in Teams will be the best approach for them to have a successful experience, or just use Chrome. So I'm curious. All right, so still on IE. Some people are using Chrome. Yep. Okay, deploying Edge next 3 months. Wow, cool. Teams app or Chrome, mostly IE. Yep, so just kind of be on the lookout for that, of how people are joining meetings, and maybe even providing a little, especially if it's like a lot of online training sessions or events, give them a little one-pager so that they know what to expect so people are not completely caught off guard. Okay, Praveen, thank you. Yep, still using IE, Edge, excellent. All right, so very cool. The other feature that, let's see, I think this was last week when I noticed this in GCC, where the language translation feature just popped up. And so this was in commercial for a while. I was waiting to see when it was going to come into GCC. And it's a pretty cool feature, of course, because you can toggle between the original language, the original text in its native language as it was written, and then you can toggle between the translation. So I'm going to show a video about how this works and some of the language options that are available inside of Teams application. So I'm actually signed in as my user 01 account, and I go to settings, and I can go to language and change the language from English to Spanish. And you have to save and restart for the language to be reflected. And what you'll notice is that you'll see Spanish here, up at the top. You'll see some of the words translate. And I'm switching over to now typing in Firefox, because I don't know how to actually write in Spanish, right? So I'm going to put some English in and then let it translate for me. And I'm just going to copy that text and go back into Teams and paste my Spanish text in, because that is my language, right? Spanish is the language as user 01. So I'm going to then flip over to the Teams application logged in as Amie Seisay, and I see the Spanish text. So of course I can click on the ellipsis, hit translate, and it converts it to English so I can read it. So when I'm replying to the message in English, I'm going to hit send. I'm going to actually flip back over to user 01, and it comes in as English, and I have to hit the translate button to see it in Spanish. So that is how the translation works. I can flip it back to just seeing the original message. So the point of that is, if you see Spanish or the different language in certain areas, the channels are still in English, right? The messages as they come in will still be in English, but then I have to translate it, right, to Spanish for me to read it. So if you don't see the translate option, then you can always go into the Teams Admin Center if you have access to the Admin Center and go to Messaging Policies, and you can select the default policy in order to see that Translate Messages is actually turned on. All right. Does anyone know if Create a Poll is available in GCC? Let me check real quick.
Are we talking about within Teams itself?
Yes.
Oh, never mind. We have the definitive answer from Rima.
Thank you, Rima. I'm so glad you're able to make it. So Rima is the senior PM for Teams for specifically government. Yep, so thank you for that. All right. And so just checking to see if there's any other questions. All right. So a few of us have on this call have kind of talked about some information around retention policies for Teams. And so this isn't a new feature, but I wanted to talk about it because there were some considerations that I thought was worth noting. And so, of course, retention policies are all around how you manage the full life cycle of data within your organization. And these policies are going to help you with planning around how you actually perform your plans for the data inside of Office 365. And so when you are in the Security and Compliance Center, you're going to see that the Teams retention policies for chat and conversations are to be set up totally separate from other locations such as SharePoint. So of course we know that in Teams you have the team and then you have the files that are connected to that team. So again, those have to be set up differently, and I'll show you how that looks. Let me see if I have any questions. Okay, yep, I'm doing yep, you already saw that. Okay, so so retention policies in Teams. So of course, the conversations are here when you're looking at a post within a channel, and then the chat is available here when you're communicating with a particular user. So if you type in someone's name, you can of course select that person's name, and these are the conversations that you can start as it relates to chat. So in the Teams Admin Center, I'm sorry, in the Security and Compliance Center, you are going to go to Information Governance, and you're going to click on Retention. And when you select Create, so you're going to create a new policy or new retention policy, you're going to type in a name. And of course, a description would be nice as well. It's kind of. And then you're going to choose how long do you want to keep this data around, or do you simply want to just delete it? So if I can, choose which policies are, which timeframes are effective for me based on timeframes those items were created or modified, then I can choose. Maybe I want to have a 1-day retention policy. That was actually a request that was asked of me. Is it possible to do that? So the Teams channel messages and chats are down below. And as soon as I select those items, you notice that the options above become disabled. So that's why I was mentioning you set them up separately from the other locations. So when I select Teams channel messages, I can choose which team I want to apply this retention policy to. And you'll select the team, of course, and hit choose. And then you can, of course, choose to select it for a particular user and decide to clear out their chat messages. So you can do an include or you can do an exclude. So you have options for that. And you'll hit next. And I think it takes about a day to reflect. Yeah, it says it takes about a day to apply the policy. And so just kind of wait for it to become in effect. So when I first started out using retention policies, there were some things that I noticed, and I don't know if anyone has noticed anything different, so I would love to hear feedback on this. I noticed that, and this was probably 6 months ago or so, I noticed that when I would be in the desktop application for Teams, and I'll show this slide as well to help with this. I noticed that the messages will take a little longer to clear out than it would in the browser. But I would just plan for a couple of things. The private channel messages are not supported, and it does take 3 to 7 days to clean up those messages. And then if you're using e-discovery tools, just be mindful of the time period in which you're actually deleting versus when they actually are cleared out. So those are the things that I've noticed. I noticed that this weekend and for the past couple of days, it has gotten better. And I've seen that it's been a more consistent with the application in the browser experience. So does anyone have any other thoughts, experiences, questions, comments about retention policies for teams? Because Jeremy, I know you and I had some conversations about it, and I just wanted to see if there was any other feedback on that.
We did. I was actually interested to see it. I did not know that it turned off the other options when you turned it on for Teams chat. That's good.
Okay. And I was trying to see if Melissa Ovard was here. We had a conversation about that as well. So let's see, on a 15-month retention policy, so we watch for next year. Okay. Yes. So yeah, just watch out for that.
I would say, based on my experience in GCC, you can't do it by groups. It's always by individual, which is really unfortunate when you want to manage. If you're a government, you have capstone officials, and so you need to retain their email forever, and so you have to individually add and remove people from the capstone label policy, which is kind of annoying. Instead of using a group to drive that, you can use a group to add them all initially, and it will just take everybody out of the group and add them individually.
Okay, got it. Thank you, Jeremy. All right, so we're good with retention policies. All right, so let's talk about a new app that literally just popped up. What was that, a week ago? 2 weeks ago? And so there is an app inside of Teams called Shifts. And so it allows you to, of course, manage the schedule of a team. And it's connected to, of course, a team inside of Teams. And so the membership of that team is going to also be consumed by the Shift app that you apply to that team. And of course, we're going to take a look at how owners can add people to shifts and how members can, of course, put in leave requests and how owners are able to, of course, approve those leave requests. And so we're going to see how, of course, when we assign members to different shifts, that you have various options for just assigning activities or to that particular shift, and how you can define lunch breaks. And I literally just saw over the weekend how you can clock in and out from the Teams application. So because originally I saw that it was available for clocking in and out on the mobile app, it might not be available in NGC just yet, that you can clock in from the Teams app. But again, this just rolled out, so we'll take a look and see as time progresses on the clock in and out capability in the application. And we're also going to take a look in the demo around how we can see a consolidated listing of all the requests and the approval decisions on those particular requests. So I'm going to demo that. So I'm logged in as myself, and I'm going to go to the ellipsis to go to the Shifts app. And you'll notice that I have, of course, the different, well, just one team right now. I'm sorry, one shift connected to a team. If I hit new schedule, I can add more shifts to different teams. And you have to be an owner of that team in order to create the shift. So you can add groups. That was the best way that I saw how to organize the information, is just by adding groups and then putting people in those particular groups. And so you can start typing their name to add them to a group. You can add in owners, you can add in members, and then you could, of course, actually use your arrow keys and your Control C, Control V, just like Excel, to actually add, like to copy those shifts, or you can individually add them by clicking on the ellipsis, add shift, and you can assign users from here, and then change the time frame in which you want to assign a shift to them. And you can decide, of course, how long of a lunch break do you want them to have. As soon as you add that lunch break, it shows up as a little mug here, and you can add a name for the shift, and you can color code the shift, and you can also add activities for that person to do particular tasks based on certain time frames throughout their shift. When you give it a name, it takes the first 2 letters of that name and gives it a code. You can change the code, you can color code the task, you can decide how much time you want them spending on certain activities. And you'll hit done. And then, of course, you can save it and share it with the team members. You see that it shows the number of hours you've allocated on the left side. There's also several different views to see your shifts versus the team shifts. You can see, of course, the people view. You have the actual shift view, so it shows how many people were assigned to different shifts. Yep, you can switch back to the people view. By default, as the owner, I'm usually looking at the group shift. And if I go to request, I'm seeing all of the approvals and the actual decisions that were made on those items. So switching over to user 01, this is of course a member. When I go to shifts, I am seeing the default view will be my shift. So owners see the group shift, members see their shift, and you'll notice that you can switch, of course, the views to see the team shift. And I can go to request from here as a member. I'm seeing only my requests for leave, and I can, submit a request right here. Those little dots tell me that I have something on my schedule. If it's blank, then that means I don't have anything already on my schedule. So when I send the request, of course, it's here, it's pending for me. And then I'm switching back over as an owner. And now I can see user 01 has submitted their request. And it also pops up on my mobile app as well for me to actually approve their request or deny their request. So I hit approve. And I switch back as user 01 to see that the request has been approved. So if you wanted to, you could, of course, change the settings. So as the owner, you can decide to change the types of requests. You can add a custom option, or you could change these default options if you needed to as well. There's also the time tracking option where you can decide to turn it off for people to clock in and out, or if you wanted to include their location, it will basically detect if they are clocking in from a specific designated location or not. So I actually also included a link in my resources slide to a deep dive video that I actually found that was really helpful as well. Any thoughts, comments on shifts? Shifts might be a good way we get government micromanagers to adopt teams. Any integration with Planner? Ooh. Now, what I saw, I have not seen any direct integration with Planner. I did see a way. The only thing I saw was that you can export the timesheets to Excel. But I mean, you might want to do something cool like, I don't know, see if Flow can extract the data and dump it into tasks. And I'm sorry, dump it into Planner. That might be pretty cool. I would love to hear people using shifts that you see. Wrote an article about it recently, but it was more theoretical than I like it to be. Return to work scenarios. Cool. Thank you, guys. And I think the leave request feature might be a pretty cool way to start. So yeah, thank you. Like the perspectives. All right, so now let's shift gears a bit, and we're going to talk about SharePoint. I see something else popped up. Looking for shifts. PD, using different systems. Yes, definitely. Integration is always key. Thank you, Rima. Appreciate the link. All right. So let's talk about SharePoint. And I'm going to talk about some of the features that I was pretty excited about that just rolled out. So I remember, well, it wasn't too long ago. So I would have this activity that I would have people do in SharePoint training just so that they can take an Excel spreadsheet and just kind of shift them from having to do things like, because I've seen people do this, right? They'll email an Excel spreadsheet to 50 people, right? And they'll ask them to add information into the Excel spreadsheet. And I could just imagine the tedious, painful tasks that they had to do to consolidate this information, right? Once they got back all the responses. And so, you know, the better way, if there's just rows and columns of information in an Excel spreadsheet, I would suggest, you know, just converting that Excel spreadsheet into a SharePoint list, and that's what my training session will be all about. And then we will talk about how you can take the import spreadsheet app and convert your spreadsheet to a list. And so then recently I just saw that there was, I think this was early June, the ability to very quickly take that Excel spreadsheet and bring it into a list using the user interface that's more user-friendly. And basically what you would do is you would first take a spreadsheet and you will make sure that in the spreadsheet you insert it as a table. And you, I always like to do my table has headers so that those table headers can come in as the column values. And one of the things that I've noticed people would do is they would, not often, but sometimes people would have like empty rows. And when you do your import, the required column for title is not going to want you to have empty cells. So just make sure you clean up your data before you do this. And of course, it has to apply a title column to at least one column. So just plan for which column in my Excel spreadsheet will be the title column. And so this process does not work inside of Internet Explorer. I'm showing these screenshots so that you don't trip up on this or your users trip up on this, and I'm glad to share my slides. If you try to do this in Internet Explorer, it's just going to sit here at fetching table data. It's going to sit there and it's never going to move. So I'm going to show a demo on this. Let's see if I have any questions. Very cool. That's awesome. Thank you, Joe. All right. So let's take a look. So you're in your SharePoint site and you're not gonna go to add an app because that's not gonna give you the option for bringing your Excel spreadsheet into SharePoint as a list. No matter what you search for, Excel or import, it's not there, right? So you have to go to settings and site contents, and then you will go to new, and then you hit list. And then you'll say from Excel, and it's going to pull in that Excel spreadsheet that already has that table in your Excel spreadsheet that you've already defined. And then, of course, you're going to give it a name. And you'll notice that, again, it's saying just check the column types below and choose the new type if it's incorrect. So I usually will just, leave the first one as title and then change the other value. And then it creates your list. So it's just as simple as that. So no more of the whole import from spreadsheet, and then you have to, it opens it up in Excel, and then you have to select all the cells and then bring it back into the browser. And it only worked in Internet Explorer, right? It didn't work in Chrome. And so that was always another watch out if people started using another browser and then it didn't work in some browsers, right? So just be mindful of those variations, I would say. All right, so the other feature that improved, it wasn't necessarily new, but it improved over the past, I would say, month, was the ability to format your lists. And so we see now we have the options for row formatting or conditional columns with, conditional formatting with rules. And then based on the column types you select will determine the options that you have available for formatting. So let's take a look at that. Actually, so here's my list, and then I have some conditional formatting applied to. And so one of the scenarios around how I would use this is maybe for a dashboard that people can come to so that they can see which apps are available for use, perhaps, or which are in pilot phases. Because I think that people become more and more intrigued by, oh, I heard that, Teams is being used by another organization. Why aren't we using it yet? And so I think that it helps reduce the confusion around what's available, what's not available, and then also consistent messaging. So the help desk and the technical staff that's working on different efforts, they can all come to one place and see what the status is of different apps. So I like these dashboard type of approaches where you can color code and it's very quick and easy to see exactly, what the status is of different apps in the organization. And so this is just showing that this was the original options that were available. You had the ability to just edit the template and you can apply some basic formatting. And now what you're going to see is that you have options for formatting the row or a particular column, and you can apply styles or the different rules. And this does not work inside of Internet Explorer. So as soon as you edit your style and you try to apply the style, you're going to get this message. And so just, again, that, watch out, be mindful of this message if people struggle with it. And thank you, Jamie. Yep, so just kind of be mindful of that. And then we have, of course, I don't know how new this is. That's why I put new ? Because there is a way to copy the list. I mean, I just noticed it in, I think, early June, or maybe it was end of May, where you can decide to create a list similar to how you can create a list, like save a list as a template, but it's a little different. So the traditional save a list as a template meant that you can decide to include your content or not. And with this option here, it does not include all the content, like all the rows and columns, but you will get all the columns and you will get all the views. So that's what I'm depicting here. And you will get all the formatting, which is nice too, so that you don't necessarily have to start from scratch. So you could decide to have your 2020 projects, and maybe you like the structure of that list, and then you can create your 2021 and 2022 projects from this structure and keep it the same. So you have options for that. And so when you are creating your list from an existing list, what's kind of interesting is that you will see all the SharePoint sites. So it's not just the classic and modern sites, you will see the group, the sites that are connected to a SharePoint group as well. And you will see all the lists that are in those particular sites popped up. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And these are actually two groups that are not, well, never mind, I'm not going to go down that road, but these are groups and I'm going to leave it right there because groups is a whole nother topic. Considering how tied to each fiscal year and yet separate is for Gov, that is useful. New fiscal year, new list, same as it was ever. Yeah, potentially. How do you format a column that was, ooh, you know, that's a good question, Trinessa. Hi, Trinessa, thanks for joining. So last I remember researching, I remember, I think it was managed metadata is not supporting with the formatting. I'm not sure if lookups are supported though. Does anyone know if lookups are supported with formatting? And Trinessa, I can definitely follow up with you later on with that if no one knows, because I'm not sure either. All right, I'll follow up with you on that one, but I am intrigued to see if that's available. All right, so, okay, so I was really excited when I saw SharePoint Spaces roll out. So originally, I thought about, I think this rolled out when, I think it was right after the Build conference or during the Build conference, which was what, May? I can't keep up anymore. I think it was May. And so when I first saw this, there was a potential, there was a project that came my way where they were asking, it was like a construction company, and they were trying to figure out if there was a way to do like this virtual showroom. And I thought, oh, this will be cool, because then we could have all the little fixtures and they could click on a fixture like house, right? And they could, I don't know, see more information about the fixture and select it and add it to their cart or whatever the case may be. Then I thought about, well, how can we use this as like a business case scenario for government? And so I'm going to show just, you know, the demo around how you can have different options for the backgrounds. We can have images and we can have objects. And so there are two scenarios that I kind of came up with. I would love to hear if anyone has any other scenarios around this. Because it's a 3D virtual experience that could be kind of interesting, right? So I came up with maybe a hardware refresh type of scenario where people can come and interact with the new products that are currently rolling out. And so you can click on an object and you'll see that it can open up in a new tab. And I love how you can change the space around to kind of see in different ways. That was me right clicking on that object, and I can check out the laptop. Oh, this looks pretty good from different angles. It's very thin. It looks lightweight. I think I had too much fun playing with that. So if I right click on it, I can inspect. That's the default action, or I can open a new tab. Here's a file viewer. So maybe they have a guide on how to use or how to install things on their laptops. I'm not sure. So you can right click and inspect, or you can save it as a start page, or you can open up in a new tab. So that right click is not very intuitive. So I had to like learn that. And then I'm looking at the mouse. This looks pretty good, right? Looks pretty light. It's a Bluetooth mouse. That's what that alt text was. Again, I can inspect it or open up in a new tab. And if you have a VR headset, you can also see it in a virtual reality space. So I chose just a basic structure. And you can do, I just did color for this one. You can do illustrations and 3D files. I'm sorry, 360 files. You can have sounds if you needed to, or welcome messages or audio. So now I'm selecting an object, and that's what that alt text is showing, is that I put Bluetooth mouse. And those are the different actions. So you can, the default is always inspect. You can just delete it or just change it to another action. And you can add additional actions. So link to another space, a page, or audio files. So I had a pretty good time playing around with this. You can add additional objects. So you could do an org chart, you could do just basic text. If you want to have some 360 videos and images, have fun with that. And then I thought, well, what is another case that might be interesting? So I decided, well, let me play around with an office space, because sometimes people can't find, you know, different conference rooms. They want to see a layout of the office. And so, again, I just kind of, you know, played around with how do I fit this into the space nicely? You know, you can kind of pan, and that's what that rotate is. But I would have loved it if I could kind of zoom out a bit so that I can see more space maybe. So I didn't spend too much time playing around with this, but I think, you know, it could have the potential of getting better and better. Or maybe I could have just resized the image, and I just dropped some text onto the layout. I didn't spend too much time with it. And I just want to show the original image was this layout here. So it was actually, let me go back. It was actually showing this section, but I had more real estate to show. So again, I probably could have saved it differently to make it look better. But I didn't want to spend too much time on it. But yeah, just wanted to provide some different potential scenarios. I'm curious to see any thoughts on that. So, okay. Oh, thank you for saying that the lookups are supported. Appreciate that link. Space has some really interesting potential. I've seen ideas of using it for virtual conferences. I like the idea of using it as a rollout guide. Thank you, Jay. Just tested in GCC 10. I'm able to apply formatting to a column field. Very cool. Thank you so much. The one thing I would say for Spaces is that you have to activate a site feature first. And then I don't know if you noticed, but you will see when you go to the Pages library, after you activate it at the site level, when you go to new, that's when you'll see Space Preview pop up. Again, it is in preview, so it doesn't mean that you should roll it out into use for production yet, but if you are bold enough, feel free to do so. It's going to change and it's going to keep evolving, and this is how it looks when you add a new space. And then you would just go to space design and then make all, of course, your changes that you see fit. Oh yeah, no pages can be blank. My space. Well, not my space as in, you know, back in the day, my space, but my Amie space. I don't know, kind of cheesy. All right. So now let's talk about some tips for how we support app owners. And so we have to, of course, make sure that we are clearly defining the roles and the responsibilities and how they get support of different apps, and making sure that, you know, the owners of these apps are aware of the changes that are constantly rolling out. And so you might have different support models. Sometimes it could be that, you know, certain team members have to communicate back to the owners, or maybe you have content owners and content contributors, and then the app owners or the contributors can then either resolve the issues, or maybe you're having the app owners reach out to either self-help or the help desk, right? But just making sure that people are aware of, you know, what they can, how they can receive support. And I think that what's helpful is just making sure that they have an understanding of what their expectations are, right? So we have to keep in mind of records management and making sure that if they're collecting data or they're using data, making sure they understand the full life cycle of that data. And then maybe you have different options, right? There's a ton out there, but maybe you say, you know, if this app that you're building or solution you're building is going to be available for the entire agency or the enterprise, then maybe it should be vetted and you will receive support by OCIO if you do these things, right? So if you sign this agreement stating that you understand your responsibilities, or even giving them like a business process document that they can, should have pulled this up. Oh, I think I have it in here. Maybe it's a business process document that just outlines their process, so that when the help desk has to support them, the help desk has like a frame of reference of what's going on versus the owner trying to, speed talk through their process and get support at the same time because something broke, right? So I actually do share this document, and I saw Kara's on the call. Hey, Kara. I share this with the people that are in class, and especially if they're like a power user, and I will say to them, you can take this document, because I, will send it to them and say, outline what your process is. What are the steps involved? Who is going to be a part of your process? What do they need to do? And it's easier to change these diagrams around versus having to reconfigure the code because people haven't thoroughly thought through what the process is before they started building. And then you can give more detail around different requirements for these different actions and steps that are involved and who is going to be doing something. And chances are, when they build out just this idea of what the process is on paper, and they share it with the people that are going to be involved, then the people that are going to be involved can buy into it very, well, more so from the beginning. And if the process is not in alignment with what is depicted here, again, you can get into alignment a lot faster from the beginning versus building an entire process and expecting people to just use it, right? Because sometimes people will say, that's not even what I'm supposed to do, or that's not my process, and they don't buy into it. And then you can start, talking to them about what you're trying to get them to do. And then also, explain the what's in it for me approach. Like, why should they use this new process? Well, it's going to help us all work more efficiently, right? And then you're going to have to do less work. And you can sell them on the reasons for why they need to do this new process. And the other thing I would do is I would also suggest to them, again, this is another document that I share with power users, is this permissions matrix. So you might have a lovely tool that, such as like AvePoint, right, where it will give you a permissions matrix. But if you don't have a tool, then at least just come up with some sort of framework that helps outline the different groups and the permission levels and who is supposed to be doing what on each site, perhaps. And, you might not even, you might have just the site, you might have different lists and libraries in that particular site that you have specific access to different users and different permission levels. And then you can also put in some best practices, perhaps, because you want people to follow along with this permission structure. And it just makes the handoff of your solution or whatever your site is to a different owner, so that you're not having people explain how, like, what their thought process was, or maybe they left abruptly, right? And you don't have the opportunity to have a conversation with them. So these documents are going to be helpful. Or you can decide, if it's not a business application that affects the entire enterprise, then maybe they support each other. And that is the support model for the solutions that they create. And you give them the freedom to create whatever they want to create. And as long as they're using it internally for their teams, they have to support each other. So you have different options. Thank you, Fabian, for joining. You have different options for how you can manage the support, of course, for different applications. Actually, I'm gonna flip back here. And the one thing that users in the organization, especially owners, can expect is change, right? So change is going to constantly be rolling out to Office 365. People in the tech community we can't even keep up with what's going on. So it's important to come up with, especially if you're supporting the environment, come up with a plan for how your owners are going to be aware of some changes, right? So one thing that we did was we were working with content owners, and we knew that they needed to create pages and have images available. And as soon as stock images rolled out, we sent them a notification letting them know that they had this new feature available. And I think that also the help desk, right, is going to be is going to have to then keep up with what is changing constantly. So getting ahead of those releases, or things just might roll out and be available, and then having to come up with those plans for, like, what is our thought process? Is it that we're going to just let people build? Are we going to just have different resources? And I'm going to show some different resources that involve like self-help that could alleviate some of the help desk calls, perhaps. And so, yeah, so there was a couple different options to consider. And I will also say that when you're having people switch over from classic SharePoint, like 2013 on-premise, maybe some people are still in 2010, when they go to Office 365, even though people might say, oh, I can go to a classic site or a classic page, like a wiki page or web part page, and I can inject my JavaScript in there and create a highly customized site, you really should not, right? The building for today needs to be thought about in terms of how it's going to function tomorrow. Microsoft's always going to make changes. So you should build within the framework in which Microsoft suggests, which is the modern way of building in SharePoint Online is SharePoint Framework, or using PnP solutions. And of course, I'm curious, I actually put a poll out on Twitter today to see if there's any government agencies using PnP solutions. So I would love to hear that in chat. And then also if there's any particular PnP solutions that you are currently, that you're currently using. And if you're not using any PnP solutions, put that in there as well. I'm curious to see PnP search, learning, of course, learning path. I'm going to show learning pathways. Yep, cool. Yep, so, and I will always suggest that, you know, you have to give, you meaning the people that are supporting these environments, give people a place to play. If you don't give them a place to play, they're going to play around in production, and you're going to have test data all over the place. So I would create a SharePoint site collection, and that's their sandbox, and let them run amok, right? Clean it out ever so often. You can also, why not create a team, a sandbox team. Let them play around in there, especially if they're owners. Get accustomed to creating invitations or just setting up channels. And you can do your training in that environment as well. And so lastly, for self-help, there's tons of different things you can do. I'm going to show a demo for learning pathways. So learning pathways is a PnP solution, and it comes pre-packaged with all this Microsoft content. Literally, this is how the site collection looks when you deploy it. There's different playlists, and there's all this content. And if you decide that you don't need all the content, you can hide it. And it comes with all these assets that will allow you to just have it available for people to come in and see how to start a live meeting and play the videos in the browser, right? And down below, there's all these steps that they can execute for themselves to replicate this so that they don't have to call the help desk. There's lots of content in here, right? And you just have to kind of comb through it and see which ones you'll use, see which ones you'll get rid of or hide. And this is just a page. You can customize this to show how they can get help. The admin location for this shows different scenarios and different subcategories you can add. if you wanted to add a new playlist, you can just start typing in the title. You can tag it with different scenarios, products, and if you have adoption tools, as you see on the left side here, you can associate those. You can have different levels and different audience members that you want to target this information to. You can add different assets, which are pages for Microsoft content and your own content, so the pages that you might create. You can hide what you don't want to show up for people. You can hide a different section. So these are playlists, and then these are the subcategories for different products. So this is actually showing the web part that comes with it, that shows all of the information from the admin location. And then you can have specific information just for a particular product that people jump to. So you can jump right to that playlist. And there's also in the Admin Success Center a link that's helpful for adoption resources. And so you have much more information here. And I also have a link that Rima shared with me for Teams governance or Teams adoption for GCC as well, that I can certainly share if anyone needs that. So you have learning pathways, you have lots of videos on YouTube, LinkedIn Learning. You can upload your videos to stream. You can have a dedicated channel in Teams specifically for Q&A, and people in the organization can, of course, communicate with each other, answer each other's questions. So there's a number of different ways you can set that up. And these are the different resources, again, that if you need to look at the roadmap for what's coming or what has just recently rolled out, you can look at Microsoft's roadmap. Here's that Shifts deep dive. And if you need more information about retention policies, this Learning Pathways link actually shows you all the steps and how to deploy Learning Pathway solutions to your environment. You have to be a global administrator and you have to set up an app catalog. So that's global admin activities. And then that adoption resources link here as well. And these are 2 Twitter handles that I'm constantly looking to see which updates are always rolling out. And again, you have lots of people from Microsoft that will post items such as Rima, specific for GCC. And yeah, lots of great people, and like Labrina, and just a lot of people on this call that will share information. And I haven't even seen who all is in here that might have popped in. So yes, thank you guys. I really appreciate it. I would love to stick around for other thoughts, questions, comments, and feedback.
Awesome. First, I'm going to say thank you very much, Amie, for coming today and hanging with us and sharing all this wonderful information. And I look forward to just hearing more from you in the future. Thank you again.
Thank you.